Be quick with your words.
God of War is alive and well, and here to stay in 2022, with God of War Ragnarok coming out next month and is slated to be an epic finale to Kratos' time in Norse mythology. So what's next for Kratos? Well, that's speculation for another day, because in today's video, we are going to turn back the dial and return to the series' origins in ancient Greece. In our previous video, we went over 5 reasons why the older God of War games were so excellent. In today's video, we're going to be turning that all around and take a closer look at 5 aspects of the older titles that haven't exactly aged so well. If you haven't already watched the previous video, I definitely recommend you doing so by hitting this card right here. Again, just like the previous video, we will be talking about all the God of War games that took place in ancient Greek mythology. So that includes God of War 1 through 3, the PSP games, and Ascension are all represented in this video. One final disclaimer, I am a massive fan of the God of War franchise and have been playing these games when they came out ever since the first game debuted in 2005. I think all these titles are excellent, and this video isn't about slandering these classic games, rather just pointing out some criticism of some design choices that haven't exactly aged as well as other aspects. Let me know what you'd include to this list in the comments section, or if you disagree entirely. And with that, let's dive in. In no particular order, at number 5 are the QuickTime Events. That's right, the moments where you frantically mashed circle to plunge your blades of chaos into the mouths of minotaurs, and when finishing off epic boss fights. These things are everywhere, and although they were cool in the first few games, the fact that these lasted all the way through Ascension and still were as prevalent as ever is a stark reminder of where the games industry was back then. QuickTime events were lauded for their interactivity and giving the player moments to feel as if they were with the character, pulling off complex, lethal maneuvers. It wasn't a few years after the first game that the QTEs became more of a nuisance than fun. And while going back and playing these games again, the QTEs are definitely among the areas that are not as well received these days. Some of these events are absolutely awesome, with my favorites being mashing the circle button to bash in Theseus' head with the door in God of War 2, and impaling the Hydra with the mast in God of War 1. But the long, drawn-out QTEs of a few of the boss fights are more frustrating than anything, as it feels like we're just watching a movie play out. Some more precise QTEs include the proper directional placement of the joysticks, which are absolutely horrible due to how precise you need to be, and also QTEs with very limited time window to pull them off. Oh, and if you were to fail them, it's game over and you need to restart the QTE all over again. Talk about pure frustration. And at number 4 is an extension of the previous one, the scripted sequences. Yes, the scripted events that make it so you must perform just the right actions at just the right time, or else you gotta start the whole sequence over from the start. This is what I like to call Uncharted syndrome, where in the Uncharted games, there were so many scripted sequences that you would have to execute just right to advance to the next bit of gameplay. If you were to fail, you gotta start from the beginning. Now, as cool as these cinematic moments are, fail them and be prepared to see the same things over and over again until you finally get them right. Now, most God of War games don't have a problem with this, but some of the latter games in the Greek saga, namely with God of War 3 and Ascension, prove to have some sections that can really give players quite a headache. The flying sections in God of War 3 can be frustrating, especially on higher difficulty settings, and God of War Ascension has numerous scripted events that require absolute precision to get right. Be prepared to die more times in Ascension on these sections than the actual game itself, and that is why these strict, scripted sequences have earned their spot on this list. At number 3, we have the game's camera. Now, don't get me wrong. The camera in the older God of War games is actually one of my favorite aspects of the series. The fixed camera does a mostly exceptional part in tracking Kratos throughout the environments, and it makes it extra easy to dodge, as all you need to do is flick the right thumbstick in the direction you want Kratos to roll. The problem rests in mostly the later games, namely God of War 3 and, again, Ascension. Particularly Ascension. There are numerous times the camera pans out way too far, especially early on with the Hecatoncheires fight, in which Kratos is tasked with slaying enemies on a platform as the camera is panned too far back, making it difficult to get a good read on incoming attacks. This is less prevalent in the older God of War games, but still can occur in different ways, especially if there are enemies waiting for you in an adjacent room and you can't see them because the camera doesn't do an accurate job of showing you the contents of the new room you just entered. Often, Kratos has to pass over an invisible line in the game world to enact a transition to the camera to snap to the appropriate location, and oftentimes when that happens, it's too late and the enemies are already up in your face. Like I said, I love the camera for the most part in these games, but these instances make me really appreciate the freeform camera we are used to in the Norse saga of God of War games. At number 2 is a quick little pet peeve of mine. I wish that there was more time spent getting to know the supporting cast in the older titles. Ancient Greek mythology is so diverse with history and art, and it is unfortunate that the time spent with these Greek figures that we have grown to know in literature and in movies are set aside for mostly just boss encounters. Now, don't get me wrong, these fights are absolutely amazing and are among the best bosses in the entire video game industry. But it would have been nice to see the story dive deeper into who these figures are, rather than just killing them off right as Kratos is introduced to them. I like Athena's role in the stories here, as well as Pandora in God of War 3, but it would be nice to get more of an insight as to who these figures are before thrusting our blades, or thumbs, into them. Before we get to number 1, I'd like to kindly remind you to smash that like button if you are enjoying the video, and if you are loving it, go on and subscribe. I have much more God of War content lined up that you won't want to miss as we eagerly await the release of God of War Ragnarok, so hit that subscribe button for more coverage of the game and the franchise as a whole. Thank you very much for the awesome support, good people. And to wrap things up, in at number 1, we have the lack of much additional content once the game's campaigns are finished. After finishing these awesome campaigns, it would be nice to have a slew of extra modes that we could play after the credits roll. These games typically feature a Challenge of the Gods mode, where Kratos is tasked with killing hordes of enemies in combat arena-like challenges, with completion rewards resulting in alternate costumes players can use in the main game that have some sort of gameplay modifier. These are good modes, but when the campaigns run at around 7 to 10 hours apiece, it would have been nicer to have just a little bit more content to experience after the credits roll. Ascension attempted to lengthen the playtime by including an online multiplayer mode that was, in my opinion, actually quite cool, but just didn't hook me and most other players after the first few matches. We should be grateful for all the impressive work Santa Monica Studio have put into God of War 2018, and what we are likely to see a continuation of in God of War Ragnarok, by giving the player substantial optional content in the form of optional quests, more collectibles, and endgame content. Even so, the campaigns of the older God of War games were all very well worth the money when they launched, as they were and continue to be some of the greatest action games ever made. And that's it with my list of 5 aspects of the Greek saga of God of War games that aren't quite as good as I remember. Would you add anything to this list? They truly are excellent games, and I hope some of these games get eventual remakes at some point, as even though they still mostly play amazingly to this day, some reworking of the graphics and ironing out some of the issues I had with these games could revitalize them into stronger versions than their original counterparts. As always, I welcome your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you would add anything to the list. Heck, let me know your own list if you have one. Thank you for your support, and make sure to hit that like and subscribe button as always. Much more God of War content to come in the future, so look out for that, and I look forward to seeing all you good people in the next video. Peace.